I'm very excited today to talk to you about something that I have just started getting really interested in over the last year or so. And I want to talk to you about medicinal mushrooms. We're going to talk about 4 different mushrooms that are legal. And we're going to talk about in depth one that is not yet legal, but probably will be pretty soon. And if we were in person together, I would be sharing with you one of my favorite ways to take medicinal mushrooms, which is with a reishi infused coffee or tea or mocha or hot chocolate. And some of you have heard me talk about this before. Some of you have had samples before. And at the end, if you get back to us an email, we'd be happy to send you some samples and see how you can enjoy it. So if we haven't met before, my name is Tricia Thompson. I am the founder of Maryland Integrative Health, and our clinic focuses on how to maximize your wellness and the importance of lifestyle, and how we really believe that the doctor of the future is the patient, which means for you that you can take charge of your own health and you can ultimately determine what is going to be the most beneficial thing for you. So I was trained as a traditional medical doctor. I grew up outside of DC, went to University of Maryland College Park as an undergrad and got my degree in international marketing. And before I had finished school, I decided that I wanted to go to med school. So I took some prerequisites up in Baltimore and landed at Nova Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale. And there I learned so many amazing things about our body and our body's ability to heal, and learned osteopathic traditions, which really believe that form and function work together, which is why after many years of practicing emergency medicine, I found myself a little frustrated. Not that we don't do acute care well, because we do acute care amazingly. If you fall or break something or you're having a heart attack, we can intervene there. But what I found that we don't do that well is chronic care. So for most people, chronic care means the hamster wheel of modern medicine. It means going from one specialist to another specialist. It means multiple different drugs. And that reality, and the reality that nobody was telling patients that there was another way, that there was an opportunity to really heal yourself from the inside out, led me to meet Andrew Weil and go through a fellowship in integrative medicine at the University of Arizona, and to study functional medicine over the last several years. So let's talk about that hamster wheel and how to get off of it. The easiest way is to do the things that keep you healthy. And when we think about health, I always think about like elite athletes and people that are in really good shape. What do they do right? What do they do right every day? What do they practice every day? And those things are what I call the pillars of health: sleep, good nutrition, getting outside, getting fresh air, working with other people, and being in community. So those are the things that I think of that create health. And when you have good health, you choose those things. When you have dysfunctional health, you often choose more dysfunctional things that don't really make you healthier. So I think you guys would all agree that finding a way to get to that really wellness is important. And I think medicinal mushrooms can be a huge help for pretty much everybody. The cool thing about medicinal mushrooms is that they occur in nature. Pharmaceutical companies are working every day to try to narrow down that one little piece of some amazing substance that's in nature so that it can lower your cholesterol or improve your sugar glucose control. But pharmaceutical companies can't patent plants. They can't patent funguses, which is why when nature created the perfect thing, we should be using the thing that nature created. So when I think about our world and what we have to do to heal ourselves, I think about how our planet heals us. Our planet has a respiratory system. It has plants that make oxygen. It has a detoxification system. It has an electromagnetic field, much like we do. And all of these things are like, we're a tiny galaxy in and of ourselves. So we're going to work on those things today to talk about how we start to see the patterns of wellness and how we start to see the patterns of how our bodies can detoxify and heal, just like our planet is constantly detoxifying and healing. So let's watch this little video. I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Mark is recreating an experiment he worked on with colleagues at Tokyo University. Mark is recreating an experiment he worked on with colleagues at Tokyo University. He takes a blob of slime mold and then surrounds it with a pattern of oat flakes, an irresistible treat to the slime mold. What happens next is recorded by a time-lapse camera. The slime mold locates the oat flakes by growing out in all directions. But within hours, the slime mold shrinks back, leaving an intricate web of tubes that connect the oat flakes. It's these tubes that transfer nutrients around the slime mold. Incredibly, everything you can see is part of one single cell.
It needs to build a network that's quite efficient to transport all those resources around. At the same time, that network mustn't cost too much. It mustn't take up too many of its own resources. And then the other problem it has is it's going to be subject to damage. And so if there was only ever one connection, there's a risk that that would break.
The slime mold takes no chances. It grows backup roots to make sure that its food supply isn't cut off. But there's something even more extraordinary about what the slime mold has done. Mark hasn't just laid out the flakes in a random pattern.
The large blob in the middle is Tokyo.
Right.
And each of these food sources is positioned as one of the cities nearby Tokyo.
So it's a recreation of the area around Tokyo.
Indeed. So this is actually what it's based on. This is the rail network around Tokyo. And we can superimpose that over. Okay, so we align it.
That's identical. It's absolutely identical.
So you see a lot of these connections, it's formed the same sort of links. It's got a few extra ones in as well. It's a slightly more resilient network than the ones that the engineers designed.
You're telling me, wait a minute, that this slime mold has built a better network
A remarkably
than the humans built.
Yes.
The Tokyo rail system is one of the most efficient and well-organized in the world. It took lots of skilled engineers using lots of brain power to plan it. Yet somehow, slime mold has achieved the same goal.
So I guess we have found out that slime mold can achieve the same goal, which is pretty fascinating. The slime mold is just another kind of a mushroom. So how innately smart is that? And how innately smart is this whole mushroom kingdom? And that's what I want to talk about next. So mushrooms, what are they really? So they're fungi. They belong to the fungal kingdom. And what does that mean? If you all remember biology, basically what it means is that there were plants, right? And animals, fungi, comista, and protozoa. But we actually came from the fungi kingdom. So the fungi were here first, and they have been found in some form on this planet 2.4 billion years old. We have evidence of fungi on this planet. And as animals, we separated from these mushrooms 6.5 million years ago. So significantly less time than they have been around. We share over half of our DNA with them, and they are more animal than they are plants. And I always thought they were plants, but they're really not. They're really much more animal, and they breathe oxygen like we do. We'll talk about that more. Mushrooms can be poisonous, and they, so be careful. I'm not a forager. I don't go out and find my own mushrooms, but you certainly can try if you'd like. And when do you want to go do that? If you're going to go forage for mushrooms, you want to go when there's the right amount of moisture. So a little bit after it rains. There has to be some sunlight in the days before. And usually a temperature drop is what makes them come out of hiding. They also do best when there's some oxygen around. So if it's a really dark, dank forest and there's not a lot of oxygen, you're not going to find a lot of mushrooms. So foraging for mushrooms is a fun thing to do. This picture on the right is actually taken locally at the mouth of the Chesapeake in Upper Gunpoint, up by Perry Hall, if you guys know that area. But it really could be on any of the waterways around here. And this is called a folita, and it's a small to medium fleshy mushroom, and they typically live on wood, and they contain about 150 different species. So what's happening with this? How does this happen? So basically what happens is mycelium, which are the little root networks of the mushroom, get into the tree and then start to turn the tree into medicine. They start to break it down, and you know what? Same thing happens in your body. So the mushrooms turn into medicine just like they do on the tree. And when that happens, they can eat up things like tumor cells or cancer cells, and they can dissolve them in your body, just like they dissolve the dead tree trunk and put it back into recycling. Mushrooms are actually medicine for us. So it's taking the energy stored in the tree and transforming it into its higher self. And if a human consumes them, that also becomes part of your human cells. And that's kind of the way the life chain works. Does that make sense to everybody? So, kind of like chemotherapy, what does chemotherapy do? Chemotherapy would be like burning down the whole forest just to get rid of one tree stump. And we don't want to do that. We want it to be very focused. And that's what mushrooms can help us do here. So what else are mushrooms? What else do they do? So they're recyclers, and they turn hydrocarbons into carbohydrates. So what's a hydrocarbon? Basically, a hydrocarbon is dying matter, okay? So any dying matter. And what is oil? Like the oil we put in our car, the oil we use at refineries, it is dead matter from years and years ago. Dinosaur bones, old trees, plant matter, and that is the stuff that we use to make fuel. So let me show you this, because this I thought was absolutely fascinating. So what is this picture at the top here? This picture is an oyster mushroom, and it is absorbing oil. It's called mycoremediation. So oyster mushrooms, especially certain strains of them, can tolerate saltwater exposure. So what scientists are learning to do is that they're going to use these mushrooms, colonies and colonies of mushrooms, to absorb oil spills, which I think is absolutely fascinating. So basically they're taking the mycelium from the mushrooms and they're soaking them in straw. Then they're floating the straw on top of the ocean if there's an oil spill, and that will help to break down and recycle all of the toxic substances that are in the oil or the hydrocarbons that are released. So mycelium more readily degrade lower molecular weight hydrocarbons than they do heavy weight hydrocarbons. But what can happen is they can do it in stages, and they can actually break down oil that has been spilled on the water. So the other thing that you can do is the bottom picture on the left actually is showing soil that's been contaminated. And what they've done is they've made a compost with wood chips and mushrooms. And in just 16 weeks, they reduced that toxicity in the soil down to less than 200 parts per million, which allows it to be safe. It's safe for worms, it's safe for plants to grow, and that's what you're seeing on the right. So they're actually using this soil that's now been recycled to use as landscaping soil along the right side, along the sides of the roads. So anything that's been contaminated, we can actually start to decontaminate. I didn't know that before. I thought that was fascinating. So what else are mushrooms? Mushrooms can be used for both food and medicine, and they're highly ecological. Like I said, they're recyclers. They automatically can find the things that they want. Some mushrooms have hallucinogenic properties. You might have heard of those. Those are classically psilocybin mushrooms. And some of them can be dangerous to us. The Amanita muscara, which is this mushroom on the top right of the picture. So that is a classic mushroom that we've been taught is poisonous. And actually I learned that in med school, that that's a death cap mushroom and you shouldn't ever eat them. The short story is that nobody has died of these in over 100 years. And they can actually be processed at home to remove the toxicity while still retaining some of their hallucinogenic properties, which is why people would use them in the first place. So let's talk about psychedelic mushrooms, specifically psilocybin. So psilocybin is a very special mushroom. Technically, it's still illegal in the United States, but I think it's really relevant to be talking about because there is some growing body of amazing research in psychiatry and psychology using these mushrooms to help people with severe depression, anxiety, PTSD in a single dose. So if you want to look into it further, I'll send some more information, but basically they're mentally preparing people to do this drug. And then with support, the drug is being used to unravel years of problems, PTSD, anxiety, and depression, and people are getting a new lease on life, which is pretty spectacular. So we're gonna look into this further, and it's so different than all of the other medications that we're currently using psychiatrically, you know, that you have to take for a long time, and if you stop taking them, you get depressed, you want to go jump off the bridge. That's not what's happening here. So I hope that we can see a lot more of this in the future, and the data really is showing us that it's something that we should be able to maximize in the future. So one thing you should know is that it is illegal to have psilocybin, but it is not illegal to grow it, and it's not illegal to have the spores, because the spores are, they don't contain any psilocybin. So if you bought the spores and grew them yourself, that's technically perfectly legal. So there's this really interesting thing. I wonder if any of you have heard of this, because I hadn't until I started researching mushrooms, about the stoned ape theory. So basically these two guys, Terrence and Dennis McKenna, were psychonauts. What's a psychonaut? A psychonaut is a soul or spiritual sailor navigator, somebody who's looking for a method of altering their states of consciousness, and this can include meditation, or it can include mind altering substances, kind of like psilocybin or other things like that. And basically it is using all of the activities of altered states in order to grow your spiritual purpose, or for the exploration of the spiritual condition. So basically what the stoned ape theory says is that over years and years and years, monkeys and primates would come across psilocybin mushrooms, they would eat them, and in that altered state, they would have a spiritual awakening and expand their current horizons. So there's some of this theory that actual speech has come out of using these mushrooms, because it allowed the monkeys or the primates to do things differently. So if you think about somebody who you think is spiritually awakened, like the Dalai Lama, they are living on a different plane, a different vibration than many of the other of us. And they see us as what we would call mental monkeys. So they're not, they just live on a different plane. And the use of psilocybin mushrooms may allow you to move to a different plane if you're interested in that. I am mostly going to focus just on regular mushrooms that we know of. And there's some theory that mushrooms came from outer space. And what we do know is that mushrooms in their spore form could live in outer space, and they can be transported through the air and through the jet stream all over the world. So it would be very easy for mushrooms to become redistributed. So there are these mushrooms called prototexes, and they are mushrooms that were around 400 million years ago. And basically what prototaxis did is they created our soil. So they broke into the rocks, they used the minerals from the rocks and broke them down, and they actually created the soil on Earth. So there was a lot more oxygen on the planet back then, and 400 million years ago, these mushrooms would grow as high as 40 feet tall. And we have fossilized remains to show us that that actually is really what happened. So those are the prototaxis. So let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of a mushroom and how it works so that we can understand which parts of the mushrooms we're using to do different things. So mushrooms are tough, kind of like the chicken and the egg. So what came first, the spore or the mushroom? Just like the chicken and the egg, we don't really know. But what we do know is that mushrooms have multiple parts, and they have to actually have kind of a male part and a female part get together to create a germination cycle. And this is where the mycelium expansion takes place. And the cool thing about mushrooms is that unlike people, where you grow a fetus, the fetus is contained in the uterus, the whole goal of mushrooms is to expand. So they expand their root structure, they expand their mycelium, and they expand themselves in order to populate the planet. Mycelial network is under our feet. So when we're in the woods walking, the mycelium are little tendrils that are all under our feet, and they're like a rug, and it covers the entire surface of forests, and it actually wraps pretty much around the entire earth. So we could call it the wood wide web. It's kind of the original intranet. And have you ever been in the forest and you felt like the trees knew you were there or the plants knew you were there? I have, out in Washington State. I remember that deep, dark, old forest, and I felt like every step that I took, everything around me was aware of my presence. And the reality is it is, because this is their nerve system. This is how they communicate. So trees communicate to the bushes and the plants, and it all happens through the mycelium. So when we look at the life process of the mycelium, we start down here with the mycelial expansion, and then what's called a hyphal knot. That hyphal knot develops eventually into this fruiting body. So the fruiting body are the little mushroom, and then the bigger mushroom, the bigger mushroom, the bigger mushroom. And underneath are the next generation of the mycelium. And in there are where the spores are. Those spores are then released, and they are put off into the universe so that the mushrooms can repopulate themselves. So if you eat a whole mushroom that has spores in it, what will happen to those spores? So they're really going to go right through you, and that's the goal. That's why a lot of mushrooms are grown on cow patties, and they grow in stools. So the stool can get back into the soil, and then the mushrooms have an opportunity to come out of the spores and then make new mushrooms. So what we can do, though, is in medicine and using these medicinal mushrooms is the technology has gotten good enough that they can actually take the cover off the spore, and you can use that in your food. You can use it put it on your pizza. You can make tea or coffee out of it, and you can eat that part so that you get all of the nutritional support from the mushrooms. So let's see. I think that's it for this one. So I look at patterns a lot in the world, and these patterns are really interesting. And when you more than recognize patterns, you learn to understand what's really happening in nature and happening in plain sight. So if we start by looking at these photos, just take a second and see what you see. And look how they all look very similar. So the one on the bottom right is actually one of the most high-tech pictures of what all the dark matter in the universe looks like. Look at that pattern compared to above it, the roots of the tree, above that, the roots of a plant, to the left in the blue, the neurons in our brain. The middle one on the left is actually the mycelial network. So look how similar that is. Look at all of those crossing patterns expanding out. And then the bottom are the communication networks in our world as we know it. So in order for a tree to grow, all the roots have to get nourished. So we're working, and I'm working in my lifetime to get all of your roots nourished. And this is just one of the ways that we can do that. So what's trending now? What is happening in the world? On the right-hand side, what you'll see is that my search today actually for reishi mushrooms, and this is on PubMed. If you haven't used PubMed before, it is a free internet database of all of the published medical literature available. And what you can see is that there's a significant growth, at least until 2019, 2020, things have slowed down a little bit, in research on reishi mushrooms. And that to me is fascinating. So we're researching, people are actively researching things that have been around for thousands and thousands of years. They've been used for over 5,000 years for medicinal purposes, according to the information we have out of China. And the substance itself has been around for 1 million years. So PubMed is free. You can go online. So anything I say here that you're like, huh, I don't know about that, go ahead and go on and look. And on the left-hand side is the Farmer's Almanac from 2019. And there were 2 major trends that were published in that Farmer's Almanac. And one of the trends was that beverages, 2 beverages that were found the most interesting, sorry, I have a fly who's attacking me, were organic grass-fed butter in coffee. So some people know that as kind of bulletproof coffee. And the second was mushroom-infused coffees and teas. So I like to know what's trending because there's a reason that's trending. There's a reason we need to understand the different things that are going on. So we're going to look at the 5 legal mushrooms pretty quickly here. Our time is right on track. I'm really happy about that. So the first one is turkey tail, and this is actually a picture of turkey tail. Look how beautiful it is. It's almost like a seashell. All the colors are amazing. The second one is lion's mane. And the third one is Chaga. There we go. And Cordyceps. And then, like I told you, my favorite is reishi. So let's talk about the benefits of turkey tail. It is proven to improve your immune health and can help prevent the common cold. It's also an immune support, and it has been shown to be able to help attack cancers. So the cool thing is if you give this to patients who are already getting chemotherapy, it actually expands the benefit of the chemotherapy by allowing the tumor to be better exposed to the immune system, so the immune system can go and attack the tumor. It also aids in digestion, and it is prebiotic. So those hydrocarbons that we talked about, hydrocarbons get turned into carbohydrates, and more specifically beta-glucans. And these are prebiotics for our gut bacteria. So these are things that our gut bacteria love to eat that keep them really healthy. And there is some really good early research that it can help combat breast cancer and actually could help prevent breast cancer. So it's one thing to, detect breast cancer early, but not even the best mammogram in the world can prevent it from happening. So let's look at this.
Another mushroom empowers the immune system, and this is turkey tails. And turkey tail mushrooms have also been used for more than 1,000 years. NIH funded our group with a $2.1 million breast cancer clinical study, which has been recently completed. Now, this breast cancer clinical study was dealing with a non-ER, non-estrogen responsive breast cancer patients, ladies. And the study has come back with some remarkable results. And when patients have radiation therapy or chemotherapy, their immune system is oftentimes impaired, so natural killer cells are decreased. Taking these mushrooms as an adjunct therapy, not as a substitution, but to support the immune system, the natural killer cells increase on a dose-dependent basis. The red bar is no treatment with 3 grams and 6 grams per day. And then post-radiation, the immune system is depressed, and then on a dose-dependent basis, the natural killer cells are enhanced over a period of 4 weeks. So this raises base immunity function, which I think is critically important. Now, this hit home to me very personally in June of 2009, when my 84-year-old mother called me up and said, "Paul, I have something very serious to talk to you about, but you're always so busy." It's a terrible thing to hear from Mom. I said, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she's a very happy, genuine person. She goes, "I'm worried." And my mother's deeply religious, has not seen a doctor since 1968. She said, "My right breast is 5 times the size of my left. I have 6 swollen lymph glands the size of walnuts." And her voice started shaking, and I'm not ashamed to admit that I started crying. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" We spent a large part of June at the Swedish Breast Cancer Clinic in Seattle. The oncologist examined her, and upon the second examination, she had a 5.5 centimeter diameter tumor. It metastasized, it went to her sternum, it went to her liver. She had stage 4 breast cancer. The doctor gave her less than 3 months to live and stated that it was the second worst case of breast cancer she has seen as a doctor in 20 years of practice. We had the Circle family meeting. Many of you have gone through this. My mom announced that she bought a pine casket, the cheapest one that she could find, because she was going to heaven. But then the doctor said, "You know, you're too old to have radiation therapy. You can't have your breast removed. But there's an interesting study on turkey tail mushrooms at Bastyr Medical School. You might want to try taking those." And that's, my mother goes, "Well, my son's supplying those." So she was put on Taxol and Herceptin, wonderful drugs. And then she started taking 8 turkey tail capsules a day, 4 in the morning and 4 in the evening. And that was in June of 2009. And today, my mother has no detectable tumors. And I'd like to bring my mother home.
Wow. So that is mind-blowing to me, to think that we can use the best of modern medicine with substances that have been around for millions of years, have been used for thousands of years medicinally, and learn something new and do something like reverse stage 4 cancer. And the data shows that this really is happening. So let us look next at cordyceps. So cordyceps is also a really cool mushroom. And the thing about these mushrooms is I like to think of them almost as a software upgrade. So when you look at what they do, they boost your immune system, they increase your energy levels, they can rejuvenate the skin, help with asthma and bronchitis, inflammation. Cordyceps has actually been proven to reduce the incidence of arrhythmias and improve heart function and actually decrease chronic heart conditions. And it can promote healthy cortisol levels. Also can improve kidney health. So what does that mean? Like why, how does this work? And how can we use this most to help in our bodies? And basically what it does is improves the body's ability to communicate with itself, the immune system's ability to communicate, and it decreases inflammation. Our next mushroom is called chaga. Chaga is kind of cool because chaga lives usually on dying birch trees. When a birch tree gets injured, chaga actually comes up through the mycelium, through the roots, through the ground into the tree, and it creates like a scab, like a scar over the spot where a tree branch fell or the tree was otherwise injured. So if you ever want to go harvest chaga, this is what it looks like on the side of the tree. It's kind of a big lump. You have to be really, really careful when you harvest it, because if you take it off too strongly or aggressively, it actually will take away some of the immune system of the tree, and it actually will help hurt the tree, and the tree could die because of that. So if you're gonna go find chaga, you've got to find it carefully and work with somebody that knows what they're doing. Chaga can prevent and treat cancers. It stops the spread and decreases metastasis, also causes tumors to shrink. And it increases immune function in a really special way. So it increases T cells and it increases interleukin 6. So T cells and interleukin 6 are associated with what the gentleman was just talking about. Paul was just talking about the natural killer cells, and those are the cells that go out and look for the things that we don't need in our body. Interleukin 6 is a cytokine, and it helps to promote healthy immunity as well. So how could you use chaga? What can you do with it? You can take that big chunk, you can buy it from the store. You can grind it down so it's kind of like a coffee, but not super fine. And then you steep it like a tea, but not super hot, kind of medium temperature. And you can steep it for a long time until the water is basically clear. And then you can use that to drink. And the tea can soak overnight. And you can actually add that also to your coffee if you want to use it together. So it's an antiviral. It has been shown to help with hepatitis C, and it helps decrease inflammation, and it helps to increase physical endurance. So lots of athletes are using chaga and looking into this as a way to increase recovery and increase sports performance. So Cordyceps, Chaga, and Reishi all are shown to, especially for endurance athletes, to increase their performance. One other cool thing is that it has a very high ORAC rating. It's actually 146,000. What that means, it's a really, really potent antioxidant. So oxidation is when things get radicalized in your system and your body has to go out and work harder to get rid of them. So it's a very potent antioxidant. Other antioxidants, you know, vitamin C, that sort of thing. So let's talk next about lion's mane. So lion's mane, look at that. Look how cool that is. It looks kind of like your brain, doesn't it? And it is one of the most powerful brain foods that there is, because it actually crosses the blood-brain barrier. So it's a nootropic, and it can actually affect how your neural function is occurring, and it causes brain growth factors to occur. So your brain can actually regenerate itself. It protects from brain degeneration, and it enhances acetylcholine, and acetylcholine has been proven to help with memory. So people with low acetylcholine levels tend to have Alzheimer's, non-Lewy body dementia. It's people that just, you lose your spunk and your fire after a while. And low acetylcholine levels have been tied to that sort of cognitive decline. And it helps to modulate blood sugars, and it helps to enhance your mood. So that is the best stuff about lion's mane. And it is a little different because it really is a nerve focused thing. The gentleman we heard talking before was Paul Stamets, S-T-A-M-E-T-S, and he is looking at a interesting combination in research of niacin, lion's mane, and psilocybin. And what it's doing is actually reversing Alzheimer's. It's removing the plaques from the brain and improving Alzheimer's. So early research, but it looks like it's very promising. So lion's mane can be used in the brain. Think about that. And now the granddam, Ganoderma lucidum, and this is the reishi mushroom. So reishi mushrooms, they grow on trees, and they are known to increase what people call your spiritual potency. So remember we talked earlier about kind of the Dalai Lama and how he lives at a higher plane of energy, and the reishi mushrooms are felt to increase your energy. Also, they can increase your empathy and your ability to connect with humans. They've been used for 5,000 plus years in China. There's actually data back to then about what it was used for. It has been, as I just said, the mushroom of spiritual potency. It increases your microcirculation. Now, why is microcirculation important? Think about where you would need microcirculation. Mostly in your brain, because the blood vessels in the brain are very small, but also tips of your fingers and your toes, and for men, the tips of something else. So microcirculation is very, very important. And if you don't have good microcirculation, then you actually lose function in those areas. And they increase, it causes a decrease of something called nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is important to kind of vasodilate and open the circulation so that you can get enough nutrition. You can get the nerve messages down to your fingers, toes, penis, and men, and up into the brain. And so the brain's a little tough because it's got to go uphill. So when you're standing, it's still working against gravity. So microcirculation is huge. If you want to heal an injury, you need the microcirculation to start first. So those little blood vessels and lymphatic vessels are actually where the healing starts. It brings the white blood cells into the area, and then all of the regenerative tissues come from there. So what else? This reishi has been shown to help modulate blood sugars to the point where just reishi supplementation with no other changes has gotten lots of people off their insulin if they're type 2 diabetic, and off their glucophage or glyburide, which are typical blood sugar medications. They also help people to lose weight, and they do also help deplaque Alzheimer's brain. So that is where you want to be working with this reishi. You know, our healthcare system is not focused on increasing our ability to heal ourselves. So it you know, again, kind of back to that software update thing. If your computer is not working because it's all loaded with viruses, if you replace the keyboard, it's not going to make it work any better. So the same sort of thing in, you know, traditional medicine. If you cut some body part out that's not working right, you put a stent in, you're not preventing the illness from continuing to take place. You're just making the hardware better, but you're not fixing the software. So what else can reishi do? Reishi can reduce inflammation in 11 different ways. And there are people who have begun reishi either with capsules or coffees or teas and decrease their body aches tremendously. So the other thing it does is it increases NRF2 function. So NRF2 is what it's a really powerful antioxidant, and it can protect our body from cell damage. And there's over 150 published studies that demonstrate that Ganoderma has compounds that increase NRF2. So let's see what else we can talk about here. So let's look at some more Ganoderma. This is a Ganoderma growing on a tree. And, you know, sometimes I see those patterns again. The pattern that this looks like what? It kind of looks like your liver. And that's what mushrooms do, remember? So we talked about them eating the rotting tree. We talked about breaking down the minerals and rocks and turning the rocks into soil. The same sort of thing happens in your body. It helps with detoxification, and that's what your liver does. So additionally, and also if you turn it on the other side, it looks kind of like your kidneys. So I like that kind of analysis, and it also looks like your brain. So look at that reishi. Look at how huge that thing is. It's actually a 300-year-old reishi, and it is one of 300 years old. Can you imagine? So how can reishi continue to help? Promotes healthy detoxification, improves exercise performance, helps with weight management, regulates a healthy appetite. And what's really interesting is it gets you eating kind of normally. So this whole concept that we should eat all day, every day, came from where? Probably modern food science trying to get us to eat more. I mean, I remember when you were supposed to eat 3 meals a day, and then you were supposed to eat, you know, every 2 to 3 hours, at least a little bit. What that does is it actually increases inflammation in our body. And there has been study after study after study that really showed the less that you eat, the healthier you are. And what reishi allows you to do is kind of get back to that regular appetite, not the appetite where you feel hungry all the time. So it improves your sleep, and it improves the autonomic tone of the nervous system. Now, anybody who's heard me speak before knows that this is kind of my soapbox topic. I love to talk about the autonomic nervous system. So I'm going to keep this pretty brief, but what you need to understand is that reishi and other medicinal mushrooms increase what's called your parasympathetic nervous system. So what's the sympathetic nervous system? The sympathetic nervous system is the nervous system that if a tiger walks in the room and you're afraid he's going to eat you, your sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive. So what happens? Your pupils dilate. You get more blood to the places that can get you out of trouble with the tiger. So you get blood to your muscles, you get blood to your heart, and blood is stolen from all these other places, including your gut, your liver, your kidneys, and you also get less blood flow to your cerebellum, your cerebral cortex. So the cerebral cortex is kind of the big part of your brain, the part that actually thinks, and blood gets shunted to your more reptilian brain. So you're reacting. You don't have to think about what's going to happen because you know that the tiger walked in the room and you need to get out of there. So that's your fight or flight nervous system. Now, what's happened in modern society is that where it used to be that you ran into the tiger, and how long would you be there with the tiger? Not very long. This would be over quickly. Either he'd kind of smell you and decide he didn't like you and walk away, or he would eat you, or you would run like hell and hopefully get away. But what, a minute or two? Problem is now that the tiger lives with us all the time. Sometimes the tiger is our job, or a stressful environment, trying to homeschool kids while working full time and while being at home. Sometimes it's bills or a health condition of a family member or yourself. So when you live in that sympathetic division all the time, you don't fuel all of the organs that we just talked about, the important organs for detoxification, for nutrition, for long-term health. So the other side of the nervous system is called the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is your rest and digest nervous system. So what happens when we get here? Our energy is calm. Our eyes constrict. Our big brain gets turned back on. Our spleen and liver and kidneys are allowed to detoxify. We shunt blood back to our gut so we can absorb nutrients and get rid of waste. So this is a really important thing to look at, and reishi particularly increases your parasympathetic nervous system. So what does it mean? So even though there's coffee in the tea, there's caffeine in the coffee, and there's caffeine in the tea, you never get edgy. You have this increased awareness and alertness without feeling hyper. So I want to briefly just look at a couple of Reishi-monials. So basically people that have used reishi successfully. And the reason I use reishi is because this is the one I'm recommending to most people. So it's the one that I have the most feedback on. And it says, if you have any moms who've been on lockdown and back at work just like me, the Supreme is amazing boost. Supreme is a coffee with a little bit of creamer and a little bit of a sugar. I actually used to kind of be hardcore and not support the latte or the Supreme or the mocha, which are some of the organo products that I work with. But I found that the benefit of the reishi even outweighs the sugars that are in some of these substances. And if you want to be more hardcore like me, you can do the ones that don't have any sugar in them. It says, I have hypoglycemic attacks, asthma, I'm anemic. Technically, I'm low on iron, low on oxygen, and don't slow down, burn sugar very quickly to the point where a chocolate knocks me out. A brisk walk or a quick house cleaning gets me on a pump in bed very quickly. I found myself 2 weeks in trying to juggle office hours and constantly wearing a mask, tired, suffering from headaches, and just feeling blah. No energy to deal with the kids and home life after work. And if it wasn't for my sister to help out, I probably would have been burned out by now. Now I can't get through my day and function without my Supreme. I at least make supper after work and see my kids. Splitting a sachet into 2 servings is also okay. You still feel energized. So another one is...
Hi, I wanted to talk to you about the Ganoderma mushroom coffee from Organo. I tend to be somebody that, likes to try different things, but doesn't think something's going to have that much of an impact. And I wanted to try the Organo because of the benefits of the Ganoderma mushroom, and it does have a high concentration of that mushroom in it. I did experiment when using it with intermittent fasting, where you have to have your coffee black, and that's really important. So when I was doing it, I was unable to have any cream or any sugar or anything in my coffee. And I went ahead and tried it, and I actually liked it. I did this for some time, like maybe about 2 weeks consistently, to see if I could notice any differences. And when I ran out, I went ahead and said, no, I'll be fine. I can do black coffee with my own coffee. The first thing I noticed with my own coffee, watered down. So I had my normal regular coffee that I used to drink all the time, and I watered it down. And the first thing I noticed was feeling jittery. And I never realized coffee created that response in me. So it was interesting to find that information out. So I felt a little jittery, and I felt a little hyped up, and almost that sense or feeling of overwhelmed, of just being too hyper. That I thought was fascinating. I continued to do it and realized that my coffee that I used to have in the morning was always cream, and sometimes I would do a bulletproof coffee. Now when I try to go back to the coffee, I just realize it's too heavy for me and it's too much to have in the morning. So I'm having this challenge because now I find myself gravitating towards the Ganoderma coffee, not only because of the taste, but it makes me feel more level. It makes me not feel wired, and it makes me feel calmer and able to handle the mornings, especially busy mornings with 3 kids, getting them out the door. The last thing you want to do is be so hyped up that any little thing that happens kind of sets you off. And I find that the coffee just keeps you nice and calm and relaxed. It doesn't upset my stomach. So it's a low acid coffee, so I noticed the difference with that. I just have found so many benefits from this coffee that have surprised me, that I would have never thought that I would now not like my coffee with cream in it. And I did do stevia, so I do use the stevia in there, and I find that works really well. I have at times been a low on Ganoderma, the packets, and I'll mix it a little bit with some water and a little bit with some extra coffee, and that seems to be okay. But I do prefer just having this straight Ganoderma coffee. I've loved it. It keeps me more regulated. It keeps me calmer. And it's a nice pickup still but it's not overwhelming in the morning because I do tend to wake up around 4 or 5 so I can work out, and I was still able to feel that I could do that. I never felt exhausted or tired, or it wasn't giving me what I needed. It just didn't overdo it. So that's my experience with the Organo Gold coffee. I absolutely loved it. I've used the King, I've used the Black, and I love them both. So I just highly recommend giving it a try for yourself and seeing how you like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's a health coach that is working with me, and we are working on a program called the metabolic reset program called Release and Rejuvenate. And we are using this with all of our clients in this program, and they find all of the benefits that she has found as well. And a huge part of releasing weight is getting yourself into that parasympathetic state and finding your calm. So this is the last one I'm going to torture you with, and this is actually a very dear friend of mine who's a yoga teacher who has had, her share of health problems in her life. And she says, since I've switched from the regular coffee to the King, I have noticed a significant change in the way my body performs throughout the day. Although I thought I had initially wanted to make the switch to wean off of daily coffee, I found the benefits went far beyond what I was expecting. I noticed I didn't have that feeling of fast onset of jittery feeling, and although I didn't normally last very long, it was still unpleasant. And yet instead, I felt an overall feeling of staying more present in my thoughts through my morning routine. And I did not hit the afternoon crash where I'm running for another cup of traditional coffee. I now finally enjoy just tea after I eat and feel that just as alert and clear as I had just drank my coffee, my Reishi coffee in the morning. No hard AM or PM crashes. I also haven't had the unpredictable and sometimes untimely restroom breaks, thankfully. My morning inflammation and discomfort and my overall body has greatly improved. I normally drink my coffee black and am very happy with the consistent, deep taste of this coffee. Although I have been diagnosed with a mushroom allergy, I have never experienced any indication or symptoms of the normal mushroom reactions I had in the past with other mushrooms, which is probably the most validating of all the benefits of the health and how healthy and good this is for you. As I mentioned, I had planned on weaning off of coffee, but I can honestly say I enjoy it daily. I feel so different. So this is pretty powerful stuff. And that's, why I wanted to share it with you. So interestingly, the mushrooms, like the ones you buy in the grocery store, are a completely different kind of phylum of mushrooms than medicinal mushrooms. So I have never met anybody who actually has an allergy to mushrooms. I have found that some people, when they first start taking medicinal mushrooms, either in capsules or with beverages, they can have a little diarrhea in the first few days, a little GI upset. Usually these are people that are more toxic. These are people that have a lot more issues in them, and it usually goes away within a couple of days, even with fairly high doses of the coffee. So how do you consume more medicinal mushrooms? So there's a lot of ways. Recipes, food is definitely one of them. So I wanted to share with you Andrew Weil's Shiitake Teriyaki. Dr. Weil, who you saw in the picture at the beginning with me, is a huge mushroom fan. And he is always trying to cook with them, eat them, find ways to use them. He always recommends, though, that all mushrooms must be cooked. Do not eat mushrooms raw because the benefits are better if they're cooked. So with this, you take a cup of dried shiitake mushrooms, 1/4 cup of sake, 1/4 cup of soy sauce if you're fine with soy. If not, you can use Bragg's aminos. And remember that lots of soy sauces have gluten in them. So if you are gluten-free, I definitely wouldn't recommend using regular soy sauce. 2 tablespoons of light brown sugar, some chopped onions, and 3 drops of roasted sesame oil. And you bring all of these things to a boil, simmer for 10 to 15 minutes, and serve. To reconstitute the shiitake, you just cover it with hot water and let it stand until they're completely soft. Sometimes this can take 10 to 15 minutes. And then you cut off the stems and cut them into slices, a 1/4 inch piece, and mix together and boil until the liquid's almost evaporated. And then toss the mushrooms, toss the whole thing occasionally, add the onions on the top. It's super good. You can serve it as a side, or you can put it over rice as a main dish. So other ways to get more reishi or different medicinal mushrooms into your diet is what Elizabeth was talking about and what Christy was talking about, and that's this organo coffee. The organo coffee comes in multiple different formulas. We also have green tea and red tea. You can actually take it in spore form or mycelium form. And let's talk about that a little bit. So what's the difference? So if we get the spores are remember, they're the ones that are going to go off. They carry all of the data, all of the DNA of the mushrooms, and can go reproduce themselves. So the spores are about 75% more concentrated than the other parts of the mushroom. So the mycelium is less concentrated. So for organo, the spores come in the king coffee. The king coffee is also organic. The black coffee is not organic, and it actually has the mycelium in it. So remember we talked about the spores though, and we said that if you eat the spores, they go right through you, right? So that the mushrooms can repopulate themselves. But what organo does is they've come up with an amazing way to actually crack the spores so that you get all of the benefits of the spore. And it takes 2,000 pounds of spores to just make 2 pounds of spore powder. And the spore powder is what's actually in the coffee, and it's also what's in the capsules. So the capsules are good if you're avoiding caffeine or you just don't like coffee at all. So the other thing is that you can get these into your children. And how can you do this? You can do it with their hot chocolate. And the hot chocolate is really, really good. It's very rich. It's a little dark. My kids call it dark hot chocolate. So we actually add some milk or almond milk to it to kind of make it a little creamier for them. And the mycelium is what's in the chocolate and the black coffee. And that is, remember, the root network. So that's what goes under the forest, and it is the second most potent part of the mushroom. And the last is the Ganoderma lucidum. So that is in the spore there's a separate capsule just for that. And that's what's in the black coffee. So that's the fruiting body. That's actually the mushroom part of the mushroom. And that actually helps to, and what does lucidum mean, right? Clear thinking. So if you're in a mentally taxing place, you want to use that lucidum, the organo lucidum. So what else can we talk about? We can talk about lion's mane and different ways to get that. There's a product that I use from a company called Mushroom Wisdom. And this actually is a combo of, it's called Mushroom Emperors. So it's 6 different mushroom powders and extracts. And it is pretty potent stuff. So it has reishi, lion's mane, chaga, and turkey tail, and in multiple different forms. This is 120 capsules. It's 3 capsules a day, and it's $30 through full script. So really reasonable. The other thing I want to remind you is just know your sources. Lots of mushrooms are grown in bags inside in a big old warehouse. They're fed by wood chips. And then the organo actually grows their Ganoderma in the wild in China, actually, in a place that has special permission to export them around the world. So remember, we talked about what's going to explode and why mushrooms are so important right now. You understand now what the power of them is. They're highly sustainable, they're eco-friendly, they have a multitude of benefits, they have nearly no side effects, and they are food and medicine. So I'd like to open it up to anybody that has any questions. and I want to share kind of how to reach me. So you can reach me through Facebook at marylandintegrativehealth.com. There is my email, and we have a Facebook page. And I would love to talk to you about whether medicinal mushrooms can be for you or not. Let me see if I can get everybody's beautiful faces up here and let everybody unmute themselves. How do I do that? I love technology. So anybody who wants to can unmute themselves, and we will have a conversation about mushrooms, and I hope you've actually learned something today. So, does anybody have any questions?
I have 2 questions.
Yes, Debbie, how are you?
I'm fine. Does the tea have the spores or the mycelium?
So the green tea has the mycelium, and the red tea actually has chaga.
Ah.
So they're a little different.
What makes something red tea? That was my other question. I'm familiar with green tea, black tea, white tea, but I've never heard of red tea.
It's actually a different type of tea leaf that
Okay.
they had higher antioxidants and was more beneficial to use in combination with the spores or with the mushrooms.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tricia, my question is, should we be stimulating our cytokines during COVID?
So I would argue that this isn't stimulating your cytokines. I would argue that this is
one of your slides said that, IL-2 and something else. So I was like,
I think yes. The short answer is yes. The cytokine storm that they're now not thinking isn't even really a cytokine storm that we see in people who are sick with coronavirus and severe cases of coronavirus. I think that this will only help, not hurt, because it increases your immune system so dramatically.
Right.
I'm still taking it every day.
I don't have any questions, but I did want to say thank you for hosting this. And I've taken the Ganoderma coffee also, and I noticed the exact same things like Elizabeth was saying, definitely less jittery, not needing that caffeine that I needed from regular coffee and stuff like that. But I didn't know all the other different types and the benefits to that. So I actually started writing down people that I know that I'm like, yes, this right here will definitely be beneficial. And there's no, I guess my one question, is there any like contraindications or anything like that? Because it's a mushroom, probably not.
So yes, so the short answer is no, there really are no contraindications. I'm just trying to get everybody on the screen if I can do that. There are no contraindications and very, very few side effects. Like I said, the only one I see sometimes is some diarrhea in patients that really have a lot of underlying issues initially. And I kind of welcome that because I see that as an opportunity to purge and get things out. So I think that that's an okay thing to have as long as it doesn't become overwhelming. And I think that there are lots of reasons to take this. So if you have anybody with a specific condition, I can get more specific information on what the studies show and what the benefit is. And legitimately, if you go to PubMed and you search, the research is there. There's so much information.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions right now? All right, so you know how to reach me, and I would be happy to talk to you further about any of this. So email me. I'm going to send out a little very brief 2-question questionnaire along with a resource page that has more information about not just how to get this for yourself, but some of the research we talked about. I found an amazingly funny video on the whole monkey mind eating the psilocybin explanation, and from Paul Stamets, one of the mushroom gurus of the world. And there's just, every time I dive deeper, I learn more, and I've really been inspired by what's out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks, Trisha.
You're welcome. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night.
Night.